Claude Design 2 just dropped and it drastically changes how you build finance outputs. One company design system can now carry from a board deck to a reusable analysis tool to a working executive dashboard without rebuilding the visual and structural foundation for every new project. The problem with the old workflow was that every build still felt too separate. If you wanted a board deck, a dashboard, or an internal finance tool, you had to keep re-explaining the branding, the layout rules, the visual structure, and the context behind the work. And that makes it hard to turn one good output into a repeatable system. I'm going to show you how Claude Design 2 changes that by building 3 finance outputs from the same core idea. A board deck built from an imported company design system, a variance analysis tool that adapts across 3 unrelated datasets, and a 7-page executive dashboard exported as a working standalone application. If you want the prompts and the design system files for this video, they're in my free community through the link in the description below. But for now, let's get into it. The biggest shift in Claude Design 2 is the design system. Before this update, every prompt had to describe the colors, the fonts, the spacing, and the layout all from scratch, even if you had built something almost identical the week before. But now you import that information once into a design system, and Claude then applies it automatically to everything you build afterward, whether that is a deck, a dashboard, or a working app. Projects have also moved out of being one-off conversations. Now before, every project was its own isolated chat with no memory of anything before. But now, projects live inside a proper workspace where you can attach a code base, you can connect a GitHub repo, you can choose a project template, and you can pull in previous work. So most of the intelligence sits inside that setup instead of inside one very long prompt. Design credit usage has changed as well. Previously, Claude Design ran on its own separate allowance, smaller than the rest of Claude, so a single large deck or a few rounds of edits could burn through those credits fast. But now Claude Design shares the same usage pool as the rest of Claude, which matters the moment you are building something larger with several rounds of edits. Project types have expanded as well. Before, Claude Design mainly produced one kind of prototype output. Now, when you start something new, you can choose between a prototype, slides, a document, or a wireframe, or even a lightweight animation, all built off the same design system. So one company's visual identity can carry across a board deck, KPI dashboard, and an internal tool without setting any of it up twice. Now there's also a new editing canvas. Before this update, moving a chart or resizing a component meant writing another prompt and waiting for Claude to regenerate the whole thing. Now you can click directly into a component and adjust it, or describe a change through tweaks and watch Claude apply it to the existing design instead of rebuilding it from nothing. The connection to Claude Code is new as well. Previously, a prototype was usually where the process stopped and the developer had to then rebuild it separately to make it production ready. Now a project can start in Claude Design and move into Claude Code to continue as a real application, and an application already built in Claude Code can then come back into Claude Design for more visual work. And I'll show you the editing side of that in a minute. The first build starts with teaching Claude a company's visual language. For this walkthrough, I'm using an example company by the name of Nova Energy. I had 2 files ready for this: a markdown document describing the company's colors, typography, spacing, and communication style, and a PowerPoint template showing how those rules actually get applied across a real board deck. I open Claude Design and I click Set up your design system, then select Create here. Under Design Resources, I choose link code from the computer and upload the folder containing both files. I add a short description of the company and click Continue to Generation. Claude reads both files at the same time. Instead of treating one as the master copy, it pulls the color palette and the typography from the markdown file. It pulls the slide structure from the PowerPoint. And at one point, the 2 files disagreed on the exact shade of blue. So Claude flagged the mismatch directly instead of quietly picking one, treating the written brand document as the source of truth for color, and the deck as the source of truth for layout. Now, where something was missing entirely, like a real company logo, it dropped in a placeholder and noted that it should be swapped out later on. From there, Claude turns everything into reusable pieces. Colors become tokens. Green for favorable numbers, red for unfavorable, amber for anything that needs attention. Typography becomes a hierarchy for titles, labels, and figures. Spacing rules, KPI cards, tables, and chart styles all become components that Claude can pull from on any future slide, not just this one deck. And this is the part that saves lots of time later on. You build it once and every future project pulls from it. With the design system saved, I start a new project, I select it from the drop down and upload the actual financial workbook. The prompt puts Claude in the seat of a senior FP&A manager preparing this exact board presentation. It also tells Claude to analyze the workbook and understand the business before touching a single slide. And from there, Claude uses its own judgment on what actually matters for a board audience instead of covering every metric sitting in the file. The second half of the prompt hands the visual decisions over entirely. It tells Claude to treat the imported Nova Energy design system as the single source of truth for every layout, every typography, and every color choice. And the single instruction removes the back and forth Claude would normally start with. So instead of stopping to ask styling questions, Claude puts all of its attention on the financial narrative, identifying what matters most and leaving the rest out. Claude reads the workbook first, and then it pulls out the numbers that matter to a board audience. Then it builds the deck using the components already sitting inside the design system. And what comes back is an 11-slide presentation. Executive summary, financial and operational performance, cash flow, capital allocation, a risk register, and a closing slide, all carrying Nova Energy's exact branding without me writing a single styling instruction. Editing it afterward is where this becomes worth the setup. I click the executive summary, select the KPI card, and I rename it from revenue to recurring revenue directly inside the editor. Then I open tweaks and type a short instruction asking for one more KPI on that slide. Claude adds a fifth card for gross margin and reflows the layout to fit it. It also keeps the label I already changed manually instead of overwriting it, and it turns the new KPI into a toggle so I can switch it on or off later or swap which metric it shows. The strategic priority slide is structurally correct, but it still has a common problem with AI generated decks. The information is there while the visual layer is still generic. There are 3 text heavy cards, large empty areas, and no visual distinction between 3 very different business initiatives. Claude can generate visuals on its own, but for a high-level finance deck, I need more than an image that broadly fits the topic. I need visuals that are specific to the initiative, that are composed for the space available on the slide, and that are consistent with the company's design system. So I use Annotate. I select the areas that need work, and I connect Higgsfield directly inside Claude Design. Higgsfield is the visual generation layer I use when the visuals need to be built around the initiative, the slide format, and the design system already driving the deck. I highlight the 3 cards and I give Claude a specific instruction. Create one visual for each initiative, add backgrounds to the opening and closing slides, and keep every image inside Nova Energy's navy and blue visual language. For renewable growth, Higgsfield creates a wind and solar landscape. For fleet transition, it creates an industrial power asset tied to the coal decommissioning initiative. For financial discipline, it creates transmission infrastructure at dusk, which communicates long-term investment and stability rather than repeating another energy production image. The cover and closing slides get the same treatment. Cinematic renewable energy imagery controlled by Nova Energy's navy gradient so that the tiles remain readable and the deck feels consistent from beginning all the way to end. The slide structure, typography, financial narrative, and Nova Energy design system all stay exactly the same. Higgsfield changes the visual layer, turning a structurally correct deck into something that feels designed specifically for the company presenting it. If you're building decks or presentations, dashboards, or other finance outputs in Claude Design, the right visuals will level up that final result. And I use Higgsfield whenever I need that visual layer. And if you want to try it yourself, I've added a link in the description below. You can sign up, connect the Higgsfield MCP inside Claude, and use the same workflow directly inside Claude Design. For the second build, I switched to the prototype template since the goal here was an actual interactive application rather than a deck. I attached a financial workbook and a methodology file explaining how variance should be calculated. Then I wrote one prompt asking Claude to build a reusable variance analysis tool that follows the methodology and lets me upload new files later without rebuilding anything. Claude reads the workbook and then it works out its structure on its own. And in this case, the file was a headcount and compensation budget with real problems built into it. Some salary values are missing, one row was misaligned, department names were spelled differently across tabs. Now, instead of breaking on any of that, Claude just treats it as something to solve. It flags each issue, it fills in the missing salary figures using budget rates, and then it logs every assumption it makes so that nothing gets buried inside the numbers. The finished application shows a compensation variance of $1.02 million over budget. A bridge chart underneath it walks from the $19.52 million budget figure through headcount, salary rate, and mix effects, landing on a $20.54 million actual figure. A table below ranks every department by how much it is driving the variance, and a data quality log spells out exactly what got cleaned up before any of the numbers were calculated. There's also a materiality panel built into the app with a percentage threshold and a dollar threshold that you can adjust yourself. Move either one and every chart, table, and driver ranking updates immediately to match. That single control is what lets the same app work for a quick operational check one day and a tighter executive view the next. Before I even get to that test, the app scored the first workbook on its own. A data quality score sat right next to the dataset summary, and in this case it landed at 56, which is low enough to tell me that the file needed the cleanup Claude was already doing behind the scenes. Now that score alone is a useful gut check before trusting anything downstream. The real test came next. Through the app's own upload button, I dropped in a completely different file, a standard profit and loss workbook, and then Claude reprocessed the file, recognized it was no longer a headcount dataset, and rebuilt every KPI, chart, and table around actual versus budget line items instead. And the bridge, the driver rankings, and the commentary all adjusted to the new structure on their own. It was not perfect at first. Some labels and table columns still carried old compensation language, even where it no longer applied. I opened tweaks again and asked Claude to make the whole app schema driven, detecting the dataset structure automatically instead of assuming anything about headcount or departments. Claude rewrote the underlying logic so every KPI title, chart type, and table column now gets generated from whatever data comes in. I tested it a third time with a dataset built entirely around regional sales, and the app picked up region as the dimension, grouped the transactions on its own, and rebuilt the whole dashboard around revenue instead of cost. Once exported as a standalone HTML file, all three datasets, compensation, profit and loss, and regional sales, still worked correctly without opening Claude Design again. And that is the real value here. Your finance team can keep reusing this one app instead of getting a fresh report every time the data changes. For the last build, I wanted to see how far Claude Design 2 could go from a single instruction. So I selected an existing design system that I'd already built for a firm called Blackwall Capital, picked prototype again, and connected the source workbook straight from Google Drive instead of uploading it manually. The prompt was short. It would analyze the workbook, decide what matters most to an investment bank's leadership team, and build a management dashboard around it. Claude reads through every tab first, portfolio, client revenue, and headcount, before calculating anything. And only once it understands the full picture does it start building, starting with the overall navigation and page structure before filling in each screen one at a time. What comes back is 7 connected pages: executive summary, business units, trading and risk, deal pipeline, client revenue, portfolio risk, and people and cost. Every page shares the same sidebar, the same top toolbar with a universal search bar and an export board pack button, and the same table and chart styling throughout. The executive summary opens with 6 KPI cards, a performance chart, a business unit scorecard, and commentary panel next to a list of management alerts. Move to trading and risk, and the same card and table styles reappear with entirely different numbers, and this time filterable by desk, rates, equities, commodities, credit, or FX. The deal pipeline page swaps that filter for deal status and ranks bankers by expected fees, and it reads like one internal platform rather than 7 separate outputs stitched together. Portfolio risk and people and cost round out the set, one built around position exposure and category filters, the other around headcount and compensation by function. Same cards, same tables, same charts, just pointed at different parts of the business. Now, before handing a dashboard like this to leadership, it is worth clicking into 2 or 3 pages and confirming the KPI totals actually match the source workbook, since a wrong figure on a shared platform like this shows up on every page that references it. Exported and opened outside Claude Design, every page still works exactly the same. The search bar, the filters, the navigation, all of it. And that consistency is really the whole point of the design system. Because once it's set up, you stop thinking about how things should look and you start spending that time on what the data is actually telling you. And that is the full picture. A design system built once and reused across a board pack, a self-adapting variance tool, and a 7-page executive dashboard, all carrying the same branding without repeating a single styling instruction. Now, the one thing worth remembering across all 3 builds is that none of them ask you to describe how anything should look after the first setup. That work happens once inside the design system, and every project after it just inherits it. Now, if you want the prompts and the design system files from this video, they're in the free community and the link is in the description below, and I'll see you next time.